A lot to get to in the second hour of the program. I want to kick it off, though, with the program down in Eugene. Dan Lanning had his Monday press conference.
That he did, Bob, last night.
You noted in the first hour of the show, which you can always catch at 1080thefan.com, seemed to be in a chipper mood.
Yeah.
Not as doom and gloom as maybe one would have imagined. And he talked about the offensive line. It's obviously a big area of concern, and questions are going on right now. When's Bedford coming back? Is it as simple as saying, when Bedford returns, this offensive line's going to be amazing? Dan Lanning gave his thoughts on evaluating the offensive line last night.
And I think that a lot of people will look at our offensive line and talk about, well, this is the best. We actually watch every single clip on our staff. And I don't know if people realize, like Poncho, he started at three different positions for us last year. We were a really good O-line, but he had more snaps at right guard than any other position he's had snaps at here. Also played some center for us. Also played some left guard. So across the board, we'll continue to work to figure out what's the best group, knowing that it might not just be one group that plays, along the offensive line for us. And until people get healthy, it may continue to look different. We're going to have to keep challenging ourselves to figure out what that looks like. I do think we found some highlights, at times of guys looking well, but, had some lowlights at multiple positions, and didn't matter necessarily what position a guy was at. There was mistakes at all of those. But I promise you, nobody looks at it closer than we do. Right, we spend a lot of time and effort looking at it, and we see every single rep at practice, which everyone else doesn't see. So we'll keep evaluating it. We've got guys that we can play winning football with, and that's the big key, is making sure we're able to utilize those guys.
So a couple things there. He was also asked in some follow-ups about younger players maybe getting elevated up. He said, no, they haven't earned it, but then he also dropped the line, there's not really a large gap from the top of our group to the bottom of the group. So that was interesting.
It was a no/yes answer. I don't expect them to play, but the gap's not that big.
And then he was also asked about rotating centers in and out, and if that's really the right thing to do. And he basically said, we did it last year. You guys didn't ask me these questions last year.
It's because it was good last year.
Well, he said it's not just about snaps. You could have a good snap, but maybe you're not a good blocker, or maybe you're a good blocker, but you struggle with the snaps. And so an update on the biggest area of concern for Oregon fan, because the first 2 weeks have not been great for that group.
No, and it might be the poison pill that dooms your entire season if you don't figure it out, if you don't get healthy up front. My read on the center thing was interesting. So nobody criticized it last year because JPJ was the unquestioned starter at center. Now, they would spell him from time to time, or he'd get a nick or a bump or a bruise, and they'd say, all right, let's give Poncho some snaps. That's why it wasn't criticized last year. I think largely you do want to have somebody up front that's the leader of the offensive line, similar to when they had Alex Forsythe. That was the same thing, of a guy who's a leader up front, who's in charge of the calls, who's in control of everything that's going on at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
And right now, Oregon's offensive line just doesn't have that. I think his point at the end was very telling. And from what I've heard, this is the issue that they're dealing with. You have two different centers that you're trying to figure out, how can we make this work? Poncho's the better blocker. He's a better offensive lineman. He played a ton as a true freshman last year, as Dan Lanning pointed out, because of his ability. He's not a 100% trustworthy snapper of the football. So, insert issue. Charlie Pickard, a better snapper, more consistent snapper of the football.
Nobody seems to like it.
But he's not a very good blocker. So it's like, damned if I do, damned if I don't.
What do you value more? Because I think it's the snap. I want a clean snap.
Yeah.
I think you just kind of have
to deal with it. And then you see 2 yards of carry against Idaho, and I say, is that really that hey, throw one over his head every now and then if I get 7 yards of carry, right? So, but here's the issue. Is late in that game, Charlie Pickard, who is the more reliable snapper of the football, snapped it early twice.
He did.
And one of them led to a fumble that should have lost you the game, because Dylan Gabriel somehow caught it and then decided to fumble it after he caught it, which just keystone
Just go
cops.
down. Just go down.
Just fall down, dude. And then I think after that second bad snap, they took him out of the game and went with the alternative lineup of Poncho at center and Strother at guard. Now, Poncho hasn't had any bad snaps. He was great in the Fiesta Bowl last year, but that's just been my read on it. And they're trying to figure out how do we parcel through all this, because they're still without Bedford, who might not play this week, and they're still without Dave Luley. And until they get all those pieces together, I think he is as desperate as anybody to find that combination that works.
Hold this for Saturday when I'm dead wrong. When I'm watching this game, I kind of had takeaways from his press conference that he was alluding that they probably won't have Bedford back this week. I could be wrong. Yeah. Bedford may return, and Friday we know that. And
it was ironic because last Monday he said he should be on track to play, and he didn't end up playing.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. Isn't it? He sounded like I don't know. He didn't say it outright, but the way he was talking about, and until certain guys get back from injury, and to me that sounded more like he might be out another week. I I had Danny text me yesterday something they had talked about noon to 3 that I had missed, and his takeaway was that Dusty was alluding that if they get Bedford back, all is fine. That it's just that simple. Is it that simple for you? And if I'm misrepresenting what Dusty said, I apologize.
How dare you?
I'm telling you what the text said was that it appears that Dusty thinks that this offensive line is just A-okay once Bedford comes back. There's nothing to worry about. Are you in that same camp?
Yes and no. Yes, because I do think it makes you a much better unit up front. No, because you have now seen the potential future that awaits you if another injury happens. You don't have the depth to withstand it on the offensive line. So that's the scary part for me, is that Bedford coming back might fix a lot of the issues. And maybe he plays this weekend and they run the ball like crazy. I will say they ran the ball better this week against Boise than they did the week before. But a lot of that early in the game was just Jordan James being a man-child.
He was unbelievable.
And then later in the game when they had that alternate lineup in, they were a little bit better. Not perfect, but I think with that backup group now, or the second group, I should say, with Poncho at center, Strother at guard, it was like 13 carries for 77 yards on the game.
Mm-hmm.
With Pickard at center, it was like 9 carries for 48 yards, something like that. So slightly better. Not perfect. But again, you have seen it might fix things in the short term, but can you withstand another injury? What if one of your tackles goes down? What if Poncho gets hurt? What if another guard goes down? Like you don't have a lot of depth up front. And so you are walking a wire thin margin the rest of the year, even if Bedford comes back, and just praying every time one of those guys goes down, please don't be a significant injury, because I don't know where the depth is behind them.
An early mail sack question for you from me. What would July Dirt have said if I told him this was the future of Oregon 2 weeks into the season?
Would be not happy at all, but I'd also tell
would he
you.
Call me a liar?
Yes.
You're going to struggle with Idaho
I would
and
call
Boise
you a liar.
State.
I would call you a liar. But if you told me the thing that doomed Oregon's season was going to be the offensive line, I have been raising that banner all off season. This is an issue for them. They haven't recruited very well up front. There's a lot of criticism about the offensive line coach that he hired. They had an NFL guy in Clem. He left, and they went and hired a guy who's incredibly young in Alik Terry. Now they have Kavanaugh there helping out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's a poison pill inside. Maybe he's a mole as well. I don't know. I want to sit down with him, get the DOJ on the case there. But they have had issues up front. They haven't recruited at a very high level the last 2 years. And when you're trying to plug holes through the transfer portal, it's fine. But I think you look to the future. Cornelius is a transfer. Harper is a transfer. Bedford, if he plays, is a transfer. Strother is a transfer. Yeah. I mean, I think the only guys right now up front, I mean, Pickard's a walk-on. Connerly is a recruit that they got, and Poncho is a recruit that they got.
Yep.
But a lot of these other guys are guys that they brought in. He has to. That is the biggest issue that he has in his program right now. And if you would have told me that that's the reason Oregon doesn't live up to the hype, I could have seen that coming a mile away.
Yeah.
I just didn't think it was going to happen this early in the season.
The other thing, too, is as Duck Fan noted yesterday on the show, on the text line, just seeing, I guess, the evolution slash kind of like evolving way that Will Stein calls plays with this problem. If this is a problem this weekend against Oregon State,
it changes the way you call games.
I know Bedford will eventually come back, and that I would assume this problem's happening because you have no Bedford, and so it's kind of the same group, and it's a makeshift thing, and we hope for the best. But if it is a problem this weekend against the Beavs, that is going to be fascinating to watch how Will Stein is calling offense or changing or tweaking because of not being able to trust the guys up front.
Yeah, and it makes calling. Look, I have had my issues with some of his play calls this year, but I think everybody's just out of sync because the primary thing Oregon's offense wants to do is they want to run the football, and everything else stems off of that. I mean, that's really the case with every offense in all of football. You run the ball, and then everything sets up from there. Play action pass, and you take your shots. You draw the defense up, and when you're just simply out of sync running the ball, and things are going for 2 yards, and you're in 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7 constantly, it just makes things challenging. It makes you have times where you surrender punt from your own 10-yard line because you don't want to take a sack back to your 3. The glimmer of hope that I have for this team in the short term is that I don't think for the next month that they have to be perfect to win their games.
But they have 1 month until Ohio State.
Exactly. That's the thing. And so you get if you were able to get through Oregon State this weekend, save this for Monday, they might lose the game. If you can get through that game, they got a bye week the next week, and then you play UCLA, and then you play Michigan State. You don't have to be perfect to beat any of those teams. Boise State might be better than any of those 3 teams. We'll wait and see how the rest of the year plays out. So you don't have to be perfect, but you got a couple of weeks, and if you don't figure it out by October 12th, if you haven't already lost by then, you're doomed in that game.